Hello again. Let's get started with the actual forms you will be using and completing for this project. First, we will start with the evaluation and the letters you can use when you first discuss using DICE with the caregiver. Again, you will find this in the folder that I sent you. We'll go down to Discussing DICE Talking Points. And the purpose of this is to explain why we are using the DICE approach. It describes who's doing the project, why we're doing this project, and what the caregiver involvement will entail. Some important things to note, and what you may notice, is that we modified the letter SOME to be discussed in a way that is more comfortable and inviting to the caregiver. Going back to the frequently asked questions from the second recording, some caregivers may feel uneasy with the words program or services or even the DICE acronym being introduced to them. They may interpret this as meaning that they need help, or they may feel pressured to be part of another quote-unquote program. Again, you can use whatever terminology you feel your caregivers will be most receptive to. For the purpose of this training, we describe DICE as a skill enhancement for caregivers dealing with behavioral expression due to dementia. What we want to portray is that the caregiver will learn how to manage behaviors that are caused by dementia, and that it is not intentional on the part of the person with dementia. Under these talking points, we explain that the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute is providing these skill enhancement services to evaluate its benefits to the caregiver. We also explain that the caregiver's involvement in this can help increase knowledge of what is working, and it can help future caregivers. It is also advised down here that you go over the benefits of these services to the caregiver, which include the increased likelihood of keeping their loved one at home, decreased caregiver stress and feelings of burden, reduced hospitalizations and unplanned medical services of their loved ones, and increased knowledge and confidence of how to manage behavioral changes caused by dementia. Now, the last two bullet points down here are important in that they let the caregiver know that their participation is voluntary, their information will be kept confidential, and they can still receive DICE even if they decide not to help with the evaluations. Lastly, on the bottom is the DICE acronym, again for you to refer to when you start going through the DICE worksheet with the caregiver, which I will cover in the next recording. This form is for your own reference. There is nothing to complete on here and nothing we need back from you. It is simply a form for you to refer to when talking with the caregiver. So next we will go to the questionnaire letter to the caregiver. Now, we do ask that you provide this to the caregiver so that they can have this for their reference. I will not read through this verbatim, but will cover the main points. So first up here is the title of the project, the evaluation of skill enhancement techniques to address behaviors. We have the contact information for our evaluation director and principal investigator on the grant, Dr. Jane Mahoney. And this letter basically describes the purpose of doing these evaluations, again, similar to the letter I previously mentioned that you can use for your talking points. In the second paragraph here, it explains what the questionnaires will be asking of the caregiver, and that includes feelings about caregiving, perception on responding to difficult behaviors, and if their loved one has been to the emergency room or the hospital. Again, this letter discusses that their participation is voluntary and that their information will be kept confidential. If they decide to participate, we would need a release of information if we are to mail the surveys to them and follow up by a phone call. However, again, you can do these questionnaires with the caregiver in person if you choose. But if they prefer to have it mailed to them, we would need an authorization of release form. So again, this letter should be given to the caregiver so they can keep it for their reference. And down here I have my phone number if there's any questions about the evaluations that come up. So next we will go look at the actual evaluations for the caregiver. Now this evaluation will be given to the caregiver at baseline in 6 months. Per the letter I just referenced, you can mail the evaluation to the caregivers with their permission if you feel uncomfortable or do not have the time to do the evaluations with them in person. However, many of you have mentioned to me during phone calls that you and the caregivers may prefer to do them in person since you are already in the home with them and have built a rapport with them. That is also perfectly acceptable. If it works best for us to mail the survey, we'll just need to know that from you and a release of information again from the caregiver. So again, I would stress to the caregiver that their information and answers on these evaluations will be kept strictly confidential, and the answers given are solely for the purpose of our study. They are not shared or sold to anyone. The questions are all based on a rating scale. There are no right or wrong answers on here, and these are all subjective. Caregivers should answer them to the best of their ability and however they interpret the questions to mean. There should only be one answer circled per question. So for example, do not circle 2 numbers. And please do not put information in between the 2 numbers. The survey has questions that measure feelings about caregiving, the level of support and services that the caregiver receives or would like to receive, and the usefulness of the DICE approach to them. In the evaluation, there is also information about the demographic background of the caregiver, and this is just for our grant reporting purposes. There's also demographic information for the person that they are caring for. The evaluation should take about 20 to 30 minutes max. However, the amount of time will vary depending on where the caregiver is at in their caregiving journey. So that closes out the information you need to know about the evaluations. Again, please notify me if you have any questions on this. You can now move on to recording number 4 regarding the DICE worksheet.